My name is Sophia, and at 25, the vast, mysterious, and life-giving ocean wasn't just my field of study as a marine biologist. It was my sanctuary, my passion, the very rhythm of my soul. I'd grown up in the small, weather-beaten coastal town of Port Blossom, a community whose fortunes had ebbed and flowed with the unpredictable tides and the dwindling fish stocks. My most cherished, all-consuming dream was to discover something truly extraordinary beneath those waves, something that could not only advance scientific knowledge but also breathe new life, sustainable and respectful life, back into my beloved struggling hometown. And I did. I found Azure Eden, a hidden, vibrant, astonishingly pristine coral reef ecosystem teeming with a biodiversity I'd only ever read about in textbooks, a jewel of the ocean completely unknown to science, nestled in a forgotten cove just a few miles offshore. It was a miracle. But I never ever in my wildest, salt-laced nightmares conceived that the greatest, most insidious threat to this breathtaking, irreplaceable natural wonder and to my own burgeoning career would emerge not from faceless corporate polluters or the blind forces of climate change, but from the very person I admired most in the world, my influential, celebrated, and deeply trusted mentor doctor, Alistair Finch. The memory of his initial feigned enthusiasm, his subsequent chilling betrayal, and the brazen theft of my life-altering discovery still washes over me with the force of a rogue wave threatening to pull me under. Before I take you on a journey into the luminous depths of Azure Eden, before I unravel the shocking story of how a man lauded as a titan of marine conservation callously attempted to sacrifice this pristine paradise for personal ambition and questionable allegiances, and before I recount the desperate, often dangerous fight I waged to expose his treachery and secure the future of this precious underwater realm, a fight that culminated in a public reckoning that left him utterly, visibly aghast, I'd be so incredibly grateful if you could let me know where you're joining me from on this voyage today in the comments section below. And please, I earnestly implore you, do hit that like button if you've ever poured every ounce of your being into protecting something beautiful, fragile, and vital, only to face betrayal from the most unexpected, most painful of quarters. Port Blossom. My Port Blossom. It wasn't just a dot on a map. It was the salty tang of the sea breeze that had kissed my face since birth, the mournful cry of gulls circling the weathered fishing docks, the stoic, sun-creased faces of the fishermen whose livelihoods were becoming increasingly precarious with each passing less bountiful year. My project, my obsession, was to find a way to marry conservation with sustainable economic opportunity for our town. For years, I'd spent every spare moment, every penny of my meager research stipends meticulously surveying the lesser-known, often treacherous stretches of our coastline. And then, one gloriously clear, calm September morning, during a solo exploratory dive in a remote, current-swept cove the local fishermen usually avoided due to its tricky submerged rock formations, I found it. Azure Eden. The name came to me instantly, instinctively. As I descended into a world of such vibrant, otherworldly beauty, it literally took my breath away. It was a vast, sprawling, impossibly healthy coral reef system, an explosion of psychedelic color and intricate forms teeming with a dazzling, almost overwhelming biodiversity I'd only ever dreamed of witnessing. Schools of iridescent fish, shimmering like living jewels, darted through intricate coral castles. Strange, beautiful new species of nudibranchs crawled along vibrant sponges. Even a pair of majestic, critically endangered sea turtles glided serenely past me, their ancient eyes seemingly acknowledging my presence. This wasn't just a reef, it was a biological treasure chest, a lost world, a vital, pulsating lung for our local marine ecosystem, and I knew with a sudden, thrilling certainty a potential beacon of hope for Port Blossom through carefully managed, non-invasive ecotourism and vital scientific research. My hands trembled with a mixture of awe and elation as I documented everything with my underwater camera, collecting preliminary water samples and non-invasive faunal data. This discovery, I knew, was world-class career-defining. My first most eager step upon returning to shore, still buzzing with adrenaline and disbelief, was to share my astonishing findings with my esteemed mentor doctor, Alistair Finch. He was a towering figure in marine biology, head of the prestigious Coastal Research Institute affiliated with our local university, a man whose numerous publications I had devoured as a student, whose lectures had inspired my own career path. I laid out my initial data, my breathtaking photographs, my video footage across the vast, polished expanse of his mahogany desk, my voice shaking with barely suppressed excitement as I described the wonders of Azure Eden and outlined my vision for its immediate protection as a Marine Protected Area MPA, followed by long-term research and community-led sustainable tourism. Dr. Finch listened intently, his steepled fingers resting against his lips, his expression initially one of deep scholarly concentration that gradually morphed into what I interpreted as genuine impressed enthusiasm. "Sophia, my dear girl," he said finally, his voice a rich baritone I'd always found so reassuring, resonating with apparent wonder. This is quite extraordinary, truly remarkable. If your preliminary assessment holds up, this could be a discovery of significant global importance." My heart swelled with pride and relief. "You've done exceptionally well." Of course, he continued, a note of professorial caution now tempering his excitement. "We must be absolutely rigorous. We need to verify everything, gather more comprehensive data, build an irrefutable case for protection. Leave all your data with me, your charts, your dive logs, your samples, your footage. I'll have my senior lab team begin immediate thorough analysis, and I'll start discreetly leveraging my contacts at the national level to prepare the groundwork for an MPA designation. But we must keep this strictly confidential for now, Sophia. Premature publicity could attract the wrong kind of attention. Poachers, unregulated tourism, even developers looking for new offshore opportunities. Trust me on this. We handled this correctly, and Azure Eden will be your legacy and a triumph for Port Blossom." I handed over everything, every precious photograph, every meticulously recorded data point, every dive log entry. Without a moment's hesitation, my mind already soaring with visions of scientific papers co-authored with my esteemed mentor, of successful conservation of a revitalized hometown. I trusted him implicitly, not just as a scientist, but as a guiding light in my life. For a few exhilarating weeks, Dr. Finch was the epitome of an engaged, supportive mentor. He'd call with insightful questions about my dive parameters, commend my observational skills, and discuss potential research avenues for Azure Eden. Then, gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, the nature of his communications began to shift. The calls became less frequent, his tone more distracted, almost evasive. My increasingly anxious emails requesting updates on the data analysis or the MPA groundwork were met with vague, dismissive replies about his overwhelmingly packed schedule or the unexpected complexities of the initial data requiring further time-consuming verification by independent specialists. A cold, insidious tendril of unease began to creep into my thoughts, a tiny, unwelcome voice whispering that something was subtly, indefinably amiss. Then one crisp, windswept October morning, the local newspaper, the Port Blossom Beacon, landed on my doorstep with a jarring thud, its front page dominated by a banner headline that made my blood run cold and my stomach clench with a sudden sickening premonition. Dr. Alastair Finch unveils ambitious Port Blossom Coastal Revitalization Initiative, a bold new vision for economic prosperity. My hands shook so violently I could barely unfold the paper. As I scanned the accompanying laudatory article, a suffocating wave of disbelief, quickly followed by a surge of horrified realization, washed over me. The Coastal Revitalization Initiative, as outlined by Dr. Finch, was a massive multi-million-dollar development plan vaguely promising sustainable economic benefits and enhanced marine resource management. But as I read the fine print, the specific proposed actions filled me with icy dread. Plans for dredging new, deeper shipping channels dangerously close to Azure Eden's coordinates, proposals for large-scale offshore aquaculture installations that would inevitably pollute the pristine waters, and even exploratory seabed surveys for potential mineral and energy resources in the wider coastal zone. Most chillingly, the article mentioned the recent discovery of unique, though localized, marine biodiversity hotspots, which Dr. Finch was quoted as saying would be carefully considered and integrated into the initiative's adaptive management framework to ensure minimal impact. My Azure Eden. My breathtaking, fragile discovery wasn't just being ignored, It was being subtly, cynically reframed as a minor, manageable feature within his grand, overarching, and potentially devastating development scheme. He hadn't stolen its name, not yet, but he had clearly, undeniably stolen its essence, its data, its very coordinates, and was now seemingly preparing to sacrifice its future on the altar of his own ambition and this new, alarming initiative. The mentor I had revered, the man I had trusted with my most precious discovery, hadn't just cast a shadow over my dream. He was, it appeared, actively plotting to extinguish its light forever. The days and weeks following the public unveiling of Dr. Finch's Coastal Revitalization Initiative were a disorienting, painful blur of numb disbelief, helpless, impotent anger, and a profound, almost unbearable sense of professional and personal violation. The vibrant, hopeful image of Azure Eden, once a source of such intense joy and purpose, now felt tainted, vulnerable, its future hanging precariously in the balance. Friends, bless their well-meaning hearts, offered awkward, hesitant condolences about my disappointment, their eyes filled with a mixture of pity and a clear discomfort with the unspoken elephant in the room. The fact that my esteemed mentor seemed to have so callously, comprehensively betrayed me. My parents, while privately, almost grudgingly expressing a muted sympathy for my understandable professional setback, quickly pivoted to urging me to be pragmatic, to accept the realities of how the world works, and above all, not make waves, or say anything rash that could potentially embarrass or anger Dr. Finch, a man of considerable influence in our small, interconnected academic and coastal community, and by extension cause problems for my own future career prospects. After all, they reasoned with a maddening, willful blindness that mirrored their earlier dismissal of my concerns. His grand initiative, even if it wasn't exactly what I had envisioned, was still promising to bring some much-needed investment and vital economic development to Port Blossom, wasn't it? Their inability, or perhaps their deeply ingrained unwillingness to see, let alone acknowledge the depth of his deceit, the blatant theft and cynical misrepresentation of my intellectual labor and scientific discovery, felt like a fresh, stinging betrayal, rubbing coarse, abrasive salt into an already gaping, suppurating wound. I was not just grieving the potential loss of Azure Eden. I was grieving the loss of the mentor I had idolized and the shattering of the trusting, supportive academic world I had once believed in. When I finally, after numerous unreturned calls and ignored emails, managed to corner Dr. Finch in the corridor outside his imposing office at the Coastal Research Institute, his reaction was even more chilling and dismissive than I could have braced myself for. His voice, usually so rich with professorial warmth and encouragement, was now laced with an icy, condescending politeness that made my skin crawl. "Sophia, my dear girl," he said, his eyes usually twinkling with intellectual curiosity, now cold and appraising, "I understand you're feeling proprietary about your little discovery. It's a common enough reaction in young, enthusiastic researchers, but you must understand science is a collaborative, iterative process. Your preliminary observations, while interesting, were just that, preliminary and frankly rather limited in scope. My Coastal Revitalization Initiative, on the other hand, is based on decades of my own, far broader, more comprehensive research into the entire regional ecosystem. Any perceived similarities are purely coincidental or at best reflect common scientific observations in this type of marine environment." He expertly, cruelly gaslighted me casually, dismissing my meticulously documented months of unique, painstaking fieldwork as a charming little student project, and skillfully, devastatingly painted me as a naive, overly emotional, unprofessional amateur, perhaps even a slightly unhinged one, incapable of understanding the complex, pragmatic realities of large-scale environmental management and economic development. He even had the audacity to subtly question my competence, suggesting that perhaps my inexperience had led me to overestimate the significance of what I had found. I stumbled away from that encounter, my face burning with humiliation, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest, shaking with a righteous, incandescent rage so potent, so visceral, it almost choked the air from my lungs. He hadn't just stolen my discovery. He was now trying to steal my credibility, my very identity as a scientist. But rage, I soon painfully and with a growing sense of clarity realized, however justified, however deeply felt, wouldn't reclaim my stolen work, wouldn't restore my shattered professional reputation, and most importantly, wouldn't save Azure Eden from Dr. Finch's cynical, profit-driven, and environmentally compromised revitalization initiative. I had to fight back not with raw, undirected emotion, but with cold, hard, irrefutable new scientific facts. My immediate desperate need was to return to Azure Eden to gather more comprehensive, undeniable data to build an unassailable case for its unique, irreplaceable value. But when I tried to book time on the Institute's small research vessel, the Sea Serpent, the one I had used for my initial discovery dives, I was met with a series of bureaucratic roadblocks, sudden, unscheduled maintenance issues, and eventually a curt official email from the Institute's administrator, a close associate of Dr. Finch, of course, informing me that due to budgetary constraints and a reprioritization of research objectives, all independent postgraduate fieldwork was suspended indefinitely. Dr. Finch had effectively, efficiently, and chillingly barred me from using the very resources I needed to challenge him. I was on my own adrift in a sea of institutional power and academic betrayal. My unexpected salvation, the first fragile glimmer of hope in a very dark, oppressive tunnel, came not from the hallowed halls of academia, but from the salty, weather-beaten heart of Port Blossom's own fishing community. I sought out old Captain Ben Weatherly, a grizzled, semi-retired fisherman in his late 70s, a man whose knowledge of Port Blossom's treacherous coastal waters was legendary, whose hands were as gnarled and calloused as ancient driftwood, and whose eyes held the wisdom of 1,000 tides. For years, Captain Ben had spoken in hushed, almost reverent tones, often dismissed by younger, more modern fishermen of secret sea gardens, vibrant, untouched underwater Edens, hidden amongst the jagged offshore reefs places he had stumbled upon by chance during his long, solitary decades at sea. When I, with a mixture of desperation and rekindled hope, showed him my initial blurry underwater photographs of Azure Eden, his faded blue eyes, usually clouded with a gentle melancholy, lit up with an astonishing youthful fire of recognition. "Aye, lass," he rasped, his voice thick with emotion, his gnarled finger tracing the outline of a distinctive coral formation on one of my prints. "That be the place. That be one of the old spirits' gardens. Thought I were the only soul left alive who knew its true bearings. Good on ye for findin' it proper." His immediate, unquestioning belief in me, his profound, almost spiritual connection to the sea, was the lifeline, the anchor of validation I so desperately, profoundly needed. Captain Ben, despite his age and a lingering deep-sea cough, didn't hesitate. He offered me the use of his small, sturdy, but undeniably ancient fishing trawler, the Sea Witch, a vessel as characterful and resilient as its owner. He also introduced me to Leo Maxwell, a young, fiercely independent and incredibly tech-savvy local dive instructor and underwater videographer, a man whose passionate love for the ocean was matched only by his deep-seated distrust of bureaucratic experts and large-scale top-down development schemes. Leo, initially skeptical of my stolen reef story, was instantly, utterly convinced the moment I showed him my preliminary footage of Azure Eden. His jaw literally dropped. This is world class," he breathed, his eyes wide with a diver's awe. "Untouched. Pristine. We have to get better footage, document everything before that. That initiative of Finch's even gets a chance to drop an anchor near it." And so began our clandestine, often perilous alliance. Over the next few intensely focused, nerve-wracking weeks, often under the cloak of pre-dawn fog or the fading light of dusk to avoid attracting undue attention from harbor authorities, or worse, anyone connected to Dr. Finch or his increasingly watchful associates, our unlikely trio, the old captain, the young diver, and the determined, betrayed marine biologist undertook a series of challenging secret expeditions to Azure Eden aboard the chugging, protesting Sea Witch. The conditions were often rough, the currents unpredictable, the work physically demanding and emotionally draining. But what we documented with Leo's state-of-the-art underwater camera rig surpassed even my wildest, most optimistic expectations. We meticulously mapped the reef's true, astonishing extent. It was far larger, far more complex than my initial solo dives had revealed. We gathered stunning, broadcast-quality, high-definition footage of its almost hallucinogenic biodiversity, its vibrant coral gardens pulsing with an almost sentient life. We collected crucial water quality samples, took detailed non-invasive faunal transects, and most thrillingly, on our very last, most daring dive in a previously unexplored deeper section of the reef, we stumbled upon what appeared to be several entirely new, undocumented species of brightly colored sea slugs and a critically important, previously unknown breeding ground for a rare, endangered species of regional seahorse. This wasn't just a beautiful reef anymore. It was a global biodiversity hotspot, a living scientific treasure of incalculable value. Simultaneously, while Captain Ben and Leo focused on the challenging fieldwork, I, with the invaluable discreet assistance of Professor Armitage and a network of his trusted academic contacts across the country, began to delve deeper into Dr. Finch's professional history, his current funding sources, and the shadowy corporate interests that seemed to be aligning themselves with his coastal revitalization initiative. We painstakingly sifted through his published papers, his past grant proposals, his public statements, looking for patterns, for discrepancies, for any hint of undisclosed conflicts of interest. We discovered a troubling history of him aligning his research findings with the agendas of powerful corporate sponsors, a pattern of downplaying environmental risks when lucrative development projects were at stake. Most damningly, a sympathetic anonymous source from within the finance department of the Coastal Research Institute discreetly leaked U.S. copies of email correspondence between Dr. Finch and the CEO of Oceanic Futures, Inc., a notoriously aggressive multinational corporation with a very controversial track record in offshore resource exploration and a sudden unexplained new interest in the economic potential of the Port Blossom coastal shelf. The emails, though carefully worded, strongly, unmistakably suggested that Dr. Finch was providing Oceanic Futures with privileged pre-publication access to sensitive marine survey data. My Azure Eden data, I realized with a fresh surge of cold fury, in exchange for a substantial undisclosed research grant and a lucrative future consultancy position. He wasn't just stealing my discovery for academic glory or local political gain. He was actively, cynically preparing to sell it out to sacrifice its fragile, irreplaceable beauty to the highest corporate bidder. The fight for Azure Eden had just become infinitely more dangerous and infinitely more urgent. The weight of our collective discoveries, the breathtaking, undeniable evidence of Azure Eden's extraordinary world-class ecological significance, juxtaposed with the chilling, irrefutable proof of Dr. Alistair Finch's profound academic deceit and his treacherous clandestine dealings with Oceanic Futures, Inc., felt immense, a heavy, almost sacred responsibility. We knew we had one chance, and one chance only, to expose the truth and save this precious, hidden underwater paradise before it was too late. The local Oak Haven Town Council, we understood with a grim certainty, was too deeply enthralled to Dr. Finch's carefully cultivated reputation, too easily swayed by his smooth reassurances and the glittering false promises of his coastal revitalization initiative to be our first port of call. We needed a bigger stage, a more powerful, unimpeachable platform. After much intense late-night deliberation in Captain Ben's cozy, memorabilia-filled cabin aboard the Sea Witch, with Professor Armitage joining us via a crackly video call, we made our strategic decision. We would bypass all local and regional channels where Finch's influence was deeply entrenched and take our explosive findings directly to two national powerhouses. Firstly, the uncompromising National Environmental Protection Agency, NMEPA, armed with our comprehensive scientific dossier, our stunning HD footage, and a formal petition for immediate emergency protection of the Azure Eden Reef system. And secondly, to a highly respected, fearless investigative journalist at a leading national broadcast network, a woman named Diana Holloway, renowned for her hard-hitting, Emmy-winning documentaries on environmental crimes and corporate malfeasance. Professor Armitage, using his considerable academic standing, managed to secure us an urgent, off-the-record preliminary meeting with a senior director at NEPA, while Leo, with his youthful optimism and social media savvy, crafted a compelling, concise pitch, complete with tantalizing teaser clips of our Azure Eden footage that he sent directly to Diana Holloway's personal production company. The response when it came was like a tidal wave, overwhelming and exhilarating. The NEPA director, a seasoned, no-nonsense scientist, was visibly stunned by the clarity and richness of our data, particularly the evidence of potential new species and the critical seahorse breeding ground. She immediately initiated a confidential, high-priority internal review. Diana Holloway, the journalist, responded to Leo's email within hours, her brief message crackling with professional excitement. "Footage is breathtaking. Story sounds incredible. My team and I are on the next flight to Port Blossom. Keep this under wraps." The cavalry, it seemed, was finally arriving. The following weeks were a blur of intense, focused activity. Diana Holloway and her skilled, discreet television crew descended upon Port Blossom, transforming Captain Ben's humble trawler into a temporary floating film studio. They interviewed me, Captain Ben Leo, and under conditions of strict anonymity, several other local fishermen who had long suspected the existence of special places, like Azure Eden. They filmed Leo and me conducting carefully planned dives on the reef under NEPA's discreet, unofficial observation, capturing its almost psychedelic beauty with their broadcast-quality cameras. Simultaneously, Diana's investigative team, working in tandem with Professor Armitage's academic network, began to rigorously verify our claims about Dr. Finch, unearthing further evidence of his past, ethically questionable collaborations and his current deeply compromised relationship with Oceanic Futures, Inc. The story broke on a Tuesday evening not as a local newspaper headline, but as the lead segment on Diana Holloway's primetime national investigative news program, Guardians of the Green. It was a masterpiece of environmental journalism. The nation, and indeed the world, was introduced to the luminous, breathtaking wonders of Azure Eden through Leo's stunning underwater cinematography. My quiet, passionate testimony about its discovery and its vital ecological importance was juxtaposed with hard-hitting evidence of Dr. Finch's betrayal, his data manipulation, and his secret dealings with Oceanic Futures, Inc., whose CEO declined through a spokesperson to be interviewed. The program concluded with a powerful, urgent call for the immediate permanent protection of Azure Eden. The public and scientific reaction was instantaneous, massive, and overwhelmingly supportive. Social media exploded with hashtags like #SaveAzureEden and #FinchFailsScience. Renowned marine biologists from around the globe, having seen the footage, publicly declared Azure Eden a site of extraordinary international significance. The National Environmental Protection Agency, under intense public and political pressure, announced an immediate emergency injunction halting all aspects of Dr. Finch's Coastal Revitalization Initiative, pending a full, transparent, and independent environmental impact assessment and a thorough investigation into his conduct. An emergency scientific panel comprising the nation's top marine conservation experts was hastily convened by NEPA to review our findings. The pale faces moment for Dr. Alistair Finch was not a single dramatic confrontation in a crowded town hall, but a slow, agonizing, and very public dismantling of his once stellar academic reputation and his carefully constructed facade of unimpeachable integrity. He was summoned to appear before the emergency NEPA scientific panel, a hearing that was due to intense public interest, live-streamed nationally. Faced with our meticulously presented irrefutable evidence, the side-by-side comparisons of my original data with his later altered reports, the damning email exchanges with Oceanic Futures, Inc., the breathtaking, undeniable visual proof of Azure Eden's unique splendor, his usual smooth eloquence, his professorial gravitas completely deserted him. He stammered, he equivocated, he attempted to deflect blame and denigrate my competence, but under the panel's sharp expert questioning, his arguments crumbled into a pathetic display of evasion and self-preservation. His face, once the confident, authoritative visage of a respected scientific leader, became a mask of pale, sweaty desperation. The panel's eventual findings were unequivocal. Azure Eden was indeed a unique, invaluable, and critically endangered marine ecosystem requiring immediate and robust protection, and Dr. Finch's professional conduct had fallen catastrophically short of accepted ethical and scientific standards. His academic career was for all intents and purposes over. Oceanic Futures, Inc., facing a massive public backlash and a slew of shareholder lawsuits, hastily, humiliatingly announced it was indefinitely postponing all exploratory activities in the Port Blossom coastal region. In the triumphant, sun-drenched aftermath, Azure Eden was officially, formally, and with great national fanfare, fast-tracked for designation as a fully protected marine protected area, the highest level of conservation status possible. And I, Sophia, the once dismissed, nearly discredited young marine biologist from Little Port Blossom, was to my continued astonishment and profound gratitude appointed by NEPA to lead the ongoing scientific assessment and long-term monitoring program for the newly established Azure Eden MPA. Funding, once an insurmountable obstacle, now poured in from national conservation grants, private philanthropic foundations, and even international environmental organizations, all eager to be associated with the preservation of this newly discovered natural wonder. The sweetest revenge I discovered wasn't just witnessing Dr. Finch's public disgrace, though there was, I had to admit, a certain grim cleansing satisfaction in seeing scientific integrity and truth prevail so decisively over academic betrayal and corporate greed. No, the truly sweetest, most profoundly fulfilling victory was seeing the genuine transformative hope that Azure Eden's discovery and protection brought to my beloved struggling hometown of Port Blossom. Our community, once facing a future of dwindling fish stocks and economic decline, began to cautiously, then enthusiastically embrace the vision I had so long championed. A future built not on destructive exploitation, but on the principles of sustainable ecotourism, cutting-edge marine research, and responsible community stewardship of our precious shared oceanic heritage. We began developing small-scale, non-invasive glass-bottom boat tours, carefully managed dive excursions led by newly trained local guides like Leo, and an educational visitor center that would share the wonders of Azure Eden with the world while directly benefiting the local economy. My parents, after a period of stunned, ashamed silence and deep, painful introspection, finally humbly approached me, their apologies for their lack of faith, heartfelt their newfound pride in my accomplishments, genuine and deeply moving. Rebuilding that fractured trust would be a long, slow voyage, but for the very first time since the nightmare began, I felt a fragile, hopeful current pulling us towards a possible brighter shore. Today, as I prepare for another research dive in the crystalline, life-affirming waters of the Azure Eden MPA, as I see the children of Port Blossom learning about marine conservation with wide, wonder-filled eyes, as I witness the tangible economic and spiritual revitalization of my community, all centered around the respectful celebration and protection of this incredible natural gift, I know with a certainty that settles deep in my bones that this is the true, enduring triumph. Dr. Alistair Finch, in his arrogance and greed, tried to steal not just my discovery, but the ocean's own breathtaking secret. But the ocean, I've learned with every fiber of my being, has a powerful, resilient, and ultimately unyielding voice of its own, especially when its fragile wonders are championed by dedicated, passionate human hearts, united in a common purpose. The once silent, hidden Eden beneath the waves is now a vibrant, celebrated testament to the enduring power of truth, the resilience of nature, and the extraordinary difference one determined, unwavering voice can make. Have you ever stumbled upon a hidden wonder, a secret beauty, or a forgotten truth in the natural world that you felt an overwhelming urge to protect and share? What incredible lengths would you go to? Or perhaps have you already gone to defend our planet's precious, fragile ecosystems from greed, indifference, or destruction? Share your inspiring, powerful stories of environmental passion, conservation battles, and personal resilience in the comments section below. And please don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more compelling, in-depth tales of scientific discovery, fighting for what truly deeply matters, and the ultimate life-affirming triumph of nature and integrity. Remember, our planet's hidden Edens are not just beautiful to behold. They are vital to our collective survival, and their protection is a sacred trust we all share. Thank you from the very bottom of my heart for joining me on this incredible, often perilous, but ultimately exhilarating voyage to save Azure Eden.